Juveniles are defined as those that are young and not quite developed fully as an adult. Be that as it may, that does not mean they don't also commit crime. Juveniles are not prosecuted for these crimes, however, but instead are prosecuted for delinquent acts. There are some examples, such as murder, instances of intense rape, and battery, in which they are tried as adults. Juveniles are also not subject to the right to a public trial by jury. Instead, the trial portion of the case involves a judge hearing evidence and then ruling on whether or not the minor is a delinquent. Luckily, that's where the differences end in court. Juveniles, of course, have the right to an attorney, notice of the charges, right to confront witnesses, and the right against self-incrimination. More than 70,000 young people were detained in residential placements in 2010. However, the rate of juvenile detention has been declining since 1999. Of course, like the adult alternative to juvenile detention, Asian and white males have the lowest rates of placement and detention, this being 80 and 208 per 100,000 people, respectively, with Hispanic and Black being extremely overrepresented, 399 and 1,047 per 100,000 people.
Your title? Okay. My name is Brett Littlejohn, and I'm the administrator of the Hays County Juvenile Center.
Can I ask you too, when did you start work? How long have you been in the juvenile justice field?
I've been in the field a little over 22 years.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for doing this, first of all, on short notice. I really appreciate it. So, like I said, we're going to basically stick to the script. So I'll ask you the first question, and that is, before you began working in the juvenile justice system, were you aware that the court process was so different than the adult program?
Actually, I didn't. Before starting, I had no clue how the system really worked. I just assumed it would be like anything else, and I didn't realize there was a cutoff age for kids at 10, and that eventually you could get your record sealed.
Do you feel that the majority of juveniles who commit crime, is it due to a lack of attention or guidance by their parents at home, or is it just because they're kids and they're just committing crime?
A little of both. A lot of them, they are kids. We deal with kids 10 through 17, and we do have 10-year-olds, so a lot of them don't know that they're necessarily getting in that big of trouble or doing offenses that they can get arrested for. And times have changed. You have officers in schools now. So what teachers and principals are used to handle and kind of slap you on the hand or give you a spanking or whatever and send you home, now officers are arresting kids, so it's a little easier to get arrested.
Yeah.
The other is we have kids, and I contract with kids or counties from all over the state of Texas, and some families are criminally oriented. So they learn it from older brothers, sisters, moms, dads, uncles, cousins, whatever.
Yeah.
So it is a little of both. I think it comes down to being involved with their kids and keeping them busy doing something. You get a lot of kids that are raising themselves at 12 and 13 years old.
Do you feel that this says all juveniles can be rehabilitated, but I mean do you feel like the majority of the kids can be rehabilitated?
I believe so. There's some that have maybe a mental health issue that may impede that or have another barrier to get through. However, most of the kids we deal with, after a while, it's nice to see they become kids again. We deal with some pretty hard kids.
Does anybody, and sorry this isn't on script either, this is just coming up, do they come here and if they turn 18 here, do they leave? And do you send anybody to like a state prison or
Right.
do they just get out?
The way it works for us is a kid can be here until their 18th birthday. And we've had a few the day before they turned 18, they got dismissed.
Okay.
We are far enough along in the line of this whole juvenile system that basically their next step is the old TYC system, or they call it the state system now. It's equivalent to the adult prison system.
How do you feel about juveniles being punished via capital punishment?
It can be harsh, and I always say that, there's a pro and a con, or it's a double-edged sword to dealing with kids. You look at their age only, 10 through 17, and you get some 13, 14-year-olds. However, I will say I've met some that they would just as soon hurt you as talk to you.
Yeah.
So there are some that are pretty rough at that young of an age. I've had some pretty serious offenses come through here over the years. Could they be rehabilitated? Possibly. Like I said, it's kind of tough. Now, again, certain offenses at a younger age you can get certified as an adult or get determined sentence as a juvenile up to 40 years. That's probably more appropriate. I don't know about capital punishment, where you're serving life, or the death penalty. The death penalty would be kind of harsh, but I have seen one or two that you can see they're down that path.
I'm interested in that youth initiative program. Can you explain that a little bit and how that works?
Well, the youth initiatives program is basically to try to capture those kids that are chronic offenders at school. Certain school districts just kind of get tired of kids because they're chronic behavior problem or truant problem or whatever, and that negatively impacts them as far as statistics goes for the school, or just a chronic behavior problem that causes disruptions for the rest of the kids. Certain kids, once they become 16, they can get ordered to work on their GED. So we created this program for kids that are on probation, that are not necessarily welcome back in their home school, or just have always gotten in trouble, or they're 3, 4, 5 years behind in school, to give them an opportunity to say, hey, while you're on probation, you'll go to school out here. We even pick them up. If they don't have a ride, we'll go by and pick them up and get them here. They get a teacher, and they can work on their GED. And actually, a very successful program. We graduated quite a few folks out of it, that they can come out with their GED and go on and start working in the world.
Is that program more local than the
It is. It's more of the San Marcos, Cobb, Utah area.
How do you feel, or do you feel that the system equally represents juveniles, and not so much juveniles against adults, but a juvenile, this is more towards socioeconomic, a juvenile, say, from South Texas compared to West Austin? Is it equal representation in that system?
I think it's probably a little more equal representation, or at least getting representation. Adults, they kind of just say, you got to find your own and go there. A lot of departments we deal with, the kids are not necessarily charged for the attorney, or it's not what you would pay as an adult. Say they charge $2,500 retainer, $100 an hour, they may just pay $500 for that representation, because they are kids, and parents are still responsible for their kids, even though the kids are the ones getting in trouble.
Do the parents have to? Are they responsible for that payment?
Sometimes, like Hays County, a lot of the times the kids get appointed attorneys, and they don't have to pay them back. They just appoint it, automatic appointment, and I think that's an advantage for a kid. So it doesn't really matter, if you're black, white, Hispanic, or whatever the case. You're going to get an attorney, irregardless. And if you don't have a mom or dad, they're going to appoint an ad litem, which is another attorney, to serve as your parent. So in that sense, and at least especially in Hays County, you get that representation, because it is part of our rules as well, is that you work on the punishment for the act, but also you're working in the best interest of the child.
That
cool. May be probation, because something's happening, you're getting in trouble as a kid, we got to keep an eye on you. Yeah, it's probation, it's negative in their eyes. However, it's no different than what a parent should be doing at that point.
Yeah. What'd you say though? The ad litem?
Ad litem. Guardian ad litem.
Guardian ad litem.
Yeah.
I should probably know that.
Right. It's just the terminology for kids, and again, it's just a catch for a kid.
Okay.
If mom or dad, we've had them in prisons or whatever, or in CPS custody, if they cannot get there, they have to have that second adult that's not their attorney, just to be there to advise, guidance, cool. And say, yeah, you're getting a fair shake. And again, probation is double-edged. We're double-edged. Punishment, you're locked up and you're in a secure facility. However, we're going to give you your education, we're going to feed you, and we're going to give you a program. The lady that stepped in a while ago, she's a licensed professional counselor. So they get all of that, and they may not probably get it.
Do you feel that if a juvenile starts criminal activity at an extremely early age, this says 7, but just an early, say before 10, right. Are they more likely to go on to be a career criminal?
Not necessarily. Some of it's just behavior, and we get those calls all the time. A 7-year-old or 8-year-old, I've got this kid, I don't know what to do with them. They won't go to school and this, that, and the other. And they're 8 years old. It's like, well, parent, whip them, number one, and they will start going. It's a little too late at that point. But we get those calls all the time. I can't control them, they're this and that and the other. And it kind of ties into the scared straight. I don't mind talking to them, and we really don't have scared straight. However, parents can, and they do just show up in the lobby and say, here's my kid, can you take them? It's like, no, we can't take them because they're not on probation. They got to be ordered here by a judge or whatever. However, they can see other kids that we're hauling in and out to counseling and stuff, and realize that, oh my gosh, there is a place, it does have razor wire, something could happen to me. And we do tell them, it's like, look, at 10 years old, believe it or not, you could wind up in a place like this if you get in trouble.
Do you believe that there's a correlation between the crimes that the juveniles are committing, or the crimes that you see the juveniles commit, and their race or economic status?
Maybe not so much race, but maybe the economic status. You know, economy, town does a downturn, you're going to have issues. And like I said, we contract with folks from all over the state. We get a lot of kids from Hidalgo County and Cameron County, which is Brownsville, Harlingen, and stuff like that. Huge drug problems, you know, and it's easy. I mean, I've had kids get referred to us running 1,600 pounds of marijuana. I mean, you don't find that up here, you know, and it's easy. They go right back and forth across the border. Very economically depressed area, but, you know, drugs are just available.
And how you were involved in the juvenile justice system, or how you were.
My name's Alan Martin. I worked at the Hays County Juvenile Detention Center from March of 2012 through the end of October of 2012.
Sweet. What'd you do there?
The title was Juvenile Supervision Officer, but basically we worked in like the boot camp as drill instructors.
Right on.
Just led them in day-to-day activities, from PT to drill and ceremony to just basically like.
So you were like hands-on,
right? Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's perfect. All right. Do you feel that the majority of the juveniles who commit crime, is it because of a lack of attention at home, or are they just the natural crime? Or are they just going to commit crime?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I've saw that a lot of it came down to the individual. I mean, within this field, it's kind of hard to look at each individual case, but I mean, it just seemed like each case was so much different that you could tell that their parents really cared about them. Their parents really wanted them to succeed in the program, but they just didn't care. And the other ones that their parents didn't care, they didn't care what they did, but the juvenile wanted to succeed so they could change.
How do you feel about capital punishment for juveniles?
No, I don't think it's I think that it's proven that juveniles don't understand what they do. They're not. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, there's research shows that you're not fully developed until you're in the 20s. So I don't think juveniles really understand why they do what they do, and I just don't think capital punishment for juveniles is anything we need to even think about.
Do you believe there's a correlation between the crimes juveniles commit and their economic class?
Yeah, I think there is. It seemed that a lot, this is just based on my experience, not so much research or anything I've done, but a lot of the juveniles that were there, a lot of it was drug related. And when you look at like the Valley, for instance, the Rio Grande Valley, I mean, that's predominantly what it is. It's low income, lower class, and it thrives off the drug economy. That's how it, I mean, I think because of where they're, demographics and location of where they live come into play also, but based on what that area is, that's going to be kind of a dictator of what their, economic status is, so, if that makes sense.
How do you feel that juveniles have impacted you, working with juveniles impacted you?
I had to kind of be honest with myself. Because of, not just because of the job, but because of the facility was just poorly managed, and just my experience with the actual job, I started doubting if this was even the field I wanted to go into anymore. But since I've gotten away from it, and I've kind of seen that working with juveniles is it takes a very, very, very different person to work with juveniles. And I mean, I don't know, I've kind of taken more of a compassionate role, trying to understand why a kid acts the way that they do, rather than going in there, trying to be more of the boss, the punisher, stuff like that. Because like I said, juveniles it's such a delicate situation. I mean, with each individual, you can't handle them all the same. You know, I kind of feel that with me personally that I mean, it was a good experience altogether. If it wasn't for the fact that I was still in school, I'd probably still be working there because we worked so many hours. But I mean, overall, I think it was a good experience, and I learned a lot about the juvenile system in general, and also how kids are they're so delicate. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So if you can just briefly describe who you are and what's your background in the juvenile justice force?
Sure. I'm Dr. Nathan Pino, and I'm a professor here at Texas State. And in graduate school, when I was getting my PhD, I concentrated in crime and deviance. And I've been teaching juvenile delinquency classes at the graduate and undergraduate level since 1999.
Do you feel that the majority of juveniles who commit crimes is due to a lack of guidance in homes, or because they just want to commit crimes?
Well, it's both, but it could be a lack of parental guidance and parental supervision. There's also the thrill of committing crime just because you want to.
Right.
It's a way to assert yourself as a human being when you don't have much power in society. But there's more to it than just the family and the individual proclivities of a kid. There's also the school that they go to, how well they're doing in school, the neighborhood they live in. Sometimes their social background matters in terms of how they're treated by other adults, can impact the anger that they feel. So, I mean, the reasons why juveniles commit crime are so complex and multifaceted that it's difficult to give. In fact, it's suspect if someone gives a very simple answer for why people do that.
Right. The question is, do you feel juveniles can be rehabilitated?
Definitely.
Can you elaborate on that for us?
Sure.
Maybe what's the best way they can be rehabilitated?
Best way. It will depend on what their problems are. I mean, I think that if you tailor interventions to the child's needs,
right,
then you're more able to have success. The problem in today's juvenile justice system is that there's very few treatment options or rehabilitation options, and they don't all necessarily fit what the child's needs might be. And they're often underfunded, understaffed, and not given much effort. And the earlier the intervention, the better. And we can't leave it simply up to the juvenile justice system to reform delinquents. The best thing to do would be to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Right.
But there's still obviously a lot that the juvenile justice system can do, working with other agencies like schools and social services and so on.
Okay.
The programs that seem to work are small, located near where the child lives, and very comprehensive.
For this one, but do you feel that juveniles should be punished via capital punishment?
Oh, definitely not. It violates international human rights standards and our own laws now, and the Supreme Court has ruled against it. But I'm against the death penalty in general for a number of reasons. Leaving the moral issues aside, it's more expensive. There are many mistakes, and innocent people have been executed. There's a racial bias to it, particularly if a non-white person kills a white person. And it's just inherently unfair in so many different ways. And because of the number of mistakes that have been made, you definitely just can't have a final solution.
So
and definitely with children, you can't do that because they're not able to fully appreciate what they did.
Okay. Another question: what are your view on scared straight programs, and do you find them effective?
Scared straight programs are based on a good idea in terms of let's let children see the difficulties of growing up, or not growing up, but living in a prison environment,
Right.
so that they can literally be scared straight. However, I said earlier that the causes of delinquency are multifaceted. The research I've read on scared straight programs is that they have only a short-term deterrent effect. That after about half a year or so, the effect of the program generally wears off. The kids that didn't need it are the ones that just reinforces their idea that I'm not going to get in trouble again. But it doesn't do enough on its own to prevent delinquency to a large enough number of kids, probably to justify.
Do you feel that if a child starts crime at an early age, let's say at 7, that they will go on to be a career criminal? Does that predict them being a career criminal if they start early?
If they commit a crime early?
Right. If they start committing crime at an early age.
Well, committing a crime is one thing, but if they're exhibiting, if this is based off the low self-control theory.
Right.
Yeah. If they are exhibiting antisocial behavior at like age 3, 4, they're more likely to be persistently antisocial throughout the life course. But research by many has found that that many of these kids that exhibit antisocial behavior at an early age are able to stop offending. And I mentioned early intervention before. If we had early intervention and made it a community priority to do so, I think we could turn around most all of those children who exhibit antisocial behavior early. It's not a foregone conclusion that they always will be.
I would agree with you if we all went back. Do you believe there's a correlation between crime the juveniles commit and their race/economic status?
Yes, depending on the crime, yeah.
Right.
If I remember correctly, minority youth are more likely to be violent, poor youth are more likely to be violent, white youth are more likely to use illegal drugs. But where you also see a racial effect is in how delinquents are treated in the system and the likelihood of being convicted and arrested. The process through the juvenile justice system. Races and class are very important variables in how the system treats the accused.
Right. That's very true, as we learned in our class. Lastly, if you can just explain how you teaching juvenile justice has maybe affected you in some sort of way, maybe how it changed your mindset, or if it has at all.
Yeah, teaching this course has, you have to do a lot of reading and digesting the material and deciding what to introduce to students, and what things to emphasize. And in doing all of that, I've learned much more about the juvenile justice system and juvenile delinquency in general than I thought I ever would. And it's made me more concerned about issues of race, class, and gender in juvenile delinquency and the treatment of children in general. And our attitudes toward social services in general. And that I think it's one thing that I like to emphasize, as you know, being in my class, is that you cannot separate the juvenile justice system and the children that it processes from the other social institutions out there, and such as education, family, the economy. And if we want to have a more permanent reduction in delinquency and reduce recidivism, we have to be mindful of all of the factors outside of the system itself, the juvenile justice system itself, that impact delinquency.
Right.
And examine economic policy, policies toward schools and family policy.